Yeah, we can do it upside down, we can do it like, big place, big position, it's crazy.
It always zooms in as soon as I turn it on. Oh, it's me literally zooming in. What's up guys, welcome back to my channel. It feels like it's been a minute since I have posted a video. It's really only been a week, but I think that was the first week that I have taken off in like 2 months. So it has been a little bit, but I'm excited to be back today and excited to be filming this video today. I have my special guest back again, drinking some Perrier. This is my husband, Jared, for those of you who don't know him. And today we're going to be filming a video talking all about the things that we've learned since we got married young. We posted over on Instagram about what you guys wanted to see, and this is the one that you wanted to see. So, I mean, that's a little plug for you to go over and follow me on Instagram if you ever want to request certain videos or be included in those polls. When we got married, I was 22 and Jared was 23. So according to the world standards, that is pretty young to get married, and we wanted to share some of our thoughts with you guys from what we've learned over the past almost 3 years. I think we've been married for 2.5 years now, coming up on 3, of what we've learned, and neither of us have heard what the other person has written down. So it's gonna be a surprise for both of us. It's gonna enlighten the other one a little bit. So we're excited to share those with you guys and hope that this video is helpful for you. Make sure that you do like the video if it is helpful for you. Also, make sure that you subscribe to my channel before you leave today. We would love for you guys to do that too. So let's get started. So for recap and context of our story, we actually did do like a how we met video. So I will link that up here for you guys to go back and reference the full thing. But Jared and I met when we were teenagers. I was 18 years old, you were 19 years old. We didn't actually start dating until July 2015 of the year that we met. And so I was 19 at that point and Jared was 20. We dated for a couple months. Jared went and got the ring, I think after what, like 3 months? 5 months. So 5 months in, he already had an engagement ring. So we were definitely talking about marriage. It was something that we both knew that we were on the trajectory for. And we got engaged, I think it was December 5th of 2017. So about 1.5 years after we started dating. And then we got married on August 18, 2018. So we were together for I think a total of 3 years before we were actually married, and are now going on 3 years of marriage as well. So that's the quick kind of context for you guys, the fast forwarded version of our story. But I think the reason that we even wanted to make this video today is because marriage can be such like a taboo topic in the world today. It has been something that's definitely lost its like appreciation or its value for people and in their eyes. And you know, you hear all those stats of how like 50% of all marriages end in divorce, and so more people are choosing not to get married or just remain in common law or living together and all of these different kinds of things. And so for us, when we got married, I think like there were definitely more voices that were like cheering us on and supporting us, like in terms of friends and family. And I think that's just like a testament to the people that we have around us. But you obviously do get those random people that are like, why would you do that? Like I know for me, especially at work and things like that, or I remember there was one person even at the grocery store that was like, why would you get married so young? And so for some people it can be like what a strange thing to do when so many people either choose to never get married or to push it off until they're in like their 30s or 40s or whatever. I think for most people they just don't understand it. Like they couldn't understand why you would do something that requires you to not be, I honestly like selfish anymore. I think that's the thing that often comes up is people are like, well, why wouldn't you want to take those younger years of your life to party or to meet new people?
Your wild oats.
Or like to do your own thing. But for us, there was like a different level of importance that was placed on marriage. We're gonna be coming at this video today with a Christian and biblical perspective. And for us, when we were dating, we always had marriage in mind. That was kind of the point of why we were dating. And if you think about it, you either always break up with the person that you're with or you marry them, you stay together. So that's kind of the perspective that we're coming at with. And for us, we just felt like that was the right next step. And it's also because to us, marriage is more than just like legal contracts or a piece of paper, as people refer to it a lot of the time. For us, it's like, it's not a contract, it's a covenant. And that is like a biblical thing that's brought over from this idea of covenant that God has to his people, of being faithful to them, like no matter what. And so that's the same kind of perspective that we use when it comes to marriage and how we'll be framing everything we talk about today.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously the perspective that Beth and I take when it comes to marriage is, like she's saying, a perspective that's based out of our faith, it's based out of scripture. And so for us, there wasn't really like a back door when it came to marriage. When we decided to get married or when we started to date each other, this is like, is this a person that I want to spend the rest of my life with? And we both came at it from that approach. And so it was like intense in our dating stages. And we had a lot of things that we were working through and thinking on. But that was because we were taking it really seriously, which is cool. And I think the norm is to not see marriage as something that is like important or not that it's not important. People do see it as important. They just don't see it as important enough. I think for us, it was just like, that's never going to come on the table. And of course, there are certain scenarios that like that separation probably is the best bet. And I can think of like, if you guys don't know, like Beth and I are deeply involved at our church. I'm one of the pastors there. And so we get to have a lot of conversations with a lot of people at different life stages. And in some, very few, but in some of those stages, like separation is a smart thing when it comes to like infidelity or it comes to something like, you know, like extreme abuse or something like that. So there's definitely conversations around that. But I think what I'm seeing most of the time is just like our personalities like don't really mesh, and so we're gonna split, or like you do this thing that frustrates me and you're unwilling to change.
I'm not in love anymore.
Yeah, and it's just like such weak reasons that people like don't deal with early on that begin to expand and become large things that really started as small things. But because there wasn't this commitment to each other and commitment to the marriage, those things were allowed to grow over time and become really significant over like the course of years. Many years, but sometimes what I'm seeing now is just like a couple of years. And so anyways, neither of us had that like perspective going into marriage, and that I think is what's like been like foundational. We both came from that same place.
I feel like personally what I've loved about marriage so far, especially like in my relationship with God, is that it is so much of like staring into a mirror at the end of the day of your own life and of your own heart. Because when you live like up close with someone in a way that is so intimate as marriage is, all of these things that were in you before you get married is actually exposed, and it's things that you now need to work on and process through with this other person. It is such a close relationship that there's always this commitment to, I'm going to do whatever I can to be better for you and for one another. And so at the end of the day, that actually just helps us to look more like Jesus. It's this process of becoming more like him over time and being sanctified and all of these things that help us to become better people at the end of the day than we could be on our own.
The other thing in this too is like we're not experts on this, and so I mean we're making a video claiming to not be experts but also asking you to listen to our advice. But I think the reason that like we feel like we need to do this is not because we're experts, but because like in the landscape of some of the marriages that are around us or that we've gotten to know or that we've seen over the last 2 years of us being married, it's like, man, people are getting married and not really understanding what it means as they go into it. They're dating and not really understanding what it means. They are married and not really understanding what it means. So while we're not experts in this, just from like anecdotally, like our experience, there's some big gaps that people are missing in their understanding across the board. Not in all of them, but just across the board. And for me, like especially with the guys that I'm seeing, it's primarily the guys that are like big gaps in them. And so
share this with a guy you know.
And again, like I'm not trying to say like I've got all the answers on this, but I'm just like having some conversations with people. I'm like, holy smokes, like you're not thinking about this stuff. So anyways, we're not experts on it, but we do want to get what has worked for us out to people so that hopefully it works for them.
Do you want to go first and then I'll do mine?
You go first.
Okay. I feel like this one that I've written down, we might both have, and I like have full notes on my phone, so I'm gonna be referencing them. Jared is better at just like going off the cuff, but I'm gonna reference my phone for some of these. Okay, so the first one that I would say I've learned the importance of like so much in the first couple years of marriage is to stay surrounded. I think a lot of the tendency that we can have when we start dating someone or get married is to actually isolate ourselves with that person and to go kind of into our own bubble and to do our own thing together, which can leave it can crowd out a lot of the friendships and relationships that you have in your life. And the reality is that over time, the more that you do that, the smaller your life can actually become.
Right.
You have less voices speaking into it. You have less people available there if there are not people that you can draw on for things like wisdom and advice if something is going on in your life. And so for us, we have been really intentional about finding the right friendships of people that are in similar stages of life to us, but even people that are actually ahead, that have gone through things that we haven't navigated yet, that we can actually call on and bring into our lives if we are experiencing something that we just feel like we need support with. And that's totally okay. I think we need to reduce some of the shame that there can be around not having everything figured out all the time and actually needing help from other people, and allowing people to come into our lives, speak into our relationships, and not do that in such an isolated way. I think for us, like, having a great church community is a huge element of that. And so if you are a Christian that's not plugged into a church community, that would be like my
Check out Slate Church online, live.slatechurch.com.
Tune in on Sundays, 9 to 10:30 a.m. I would obviously say, like, find, if you can, a local church community you can get plugged into. There are many great options online too. But just having people that you can do life with is a huge thing. We don't have to do life alone, and especially don't have to do marriage alone. So bring people into it.
Yeah, that was my same one, number one. Yeah, I think
There
like I see too many people that are young, that are dating, and that are thinking about marriage because it's kind of like the next step, that are completely like isolated. And even if they get people around them, they don't let them into the reality of what's happening with them. And like you said, that there's shame around, like, oh, we're not as good as what we see other people being. I think it's just amplified by social media. Everybody's putting their best out all the time, and nobody can see my bad. And so nobody actually knows what's going on, and they actually don't get a real like picture of where people are at. And I think that that's like nuts, man. Like it's just like, how do you expect to, like, your ideas are not that good. My ideas are not that good. Like, if I see a problem in our relationship, like, I can't just come up with the answer, because it wouldn't be a problem if I had the answer. Like, you would just do that thing. So you need to have other people around you to be like, I'm really struggling in this thing, or I'm having a hard time with this, or we keep doing this, why does that happen? And you need an outside perspective, because there's so much emotion in it when it's just the two of you, or there should be so much emotion. That's another problem that I see, is that people just like are indifferent about some of their relationships. But there's like, there should be so much, like, it should mean so much to you that you can't always see like the way forward, and you need to have people like speak into that. And you also need to have people speaking to you, because like they're blind spots, they're called blind spots like for a reason. You can't see them. And so you need to be able to have conversations with people, and you can't just like sit down and be like, hey, I'm gonna let you into our relationship, here's all the stuff that's going on, and then walk away from that expecting them to understand all your blind spots. It takes relationship with somebody over time to be like, dude, you do this with me in our friendship, and if you're doing this with your wife, then that's probably like a bigger problem. You need to work on this, this, and this, right? And that's like, and that goes both ways. Like, I need people to tell me that, I need to get to know people to tell them that. But the biggest thing that I think is like a hindrance to that is the humility that people need to have to say, like, I need to humble myself and realize I don't have all the answers. And I need to ask people questions, and I need to realize that they might not give me answers that I want to hear. But that is probably what I need to hear. And I think the fear of what people are going to say back to them keeps a lot of people from letting people in, because it's like, what if they say that this isn't a good thing? Or what if they say that this is like a broken area, and then I don't know what to do with that, and so I'm just not going to ask in the first place. And then you get like, that never happens in the dating stage, and then they get married, and then it's like, good luck, bro. Like, if you're not going to do it when you're dating, you're certainly not going to do it when you're married. And and then you just like, you run into all sorts of stuff there. Like, if you're not listening before, you're not going to listen during, on both sides, the guys and the girls. But again, primarily the guys. There's like this big like macho ego, like, I can't be less than you, and if you give me advice then I'm less than you, or I need to be giving you advice, and all this stuff that just like keeps guys from being open with each other about the reality of like what's happening, and admitting that like, yo, something is broken here, and I think it might be me, and I don't know how to fix it. Just like, even just talking about it is step one, you know?
Totally.
Anyways, letting people in to what's going on, that's the biggest thing.
We are aligned on point number one.
That's the biggest thing.
So the second point that I have written down here is to stay curious. This is a really big one, because I think when people think about marriage, and especially like getting married young, the big fear that often comes up is like your brain isn't fully developed until you're 25 years old, or like you're gonna change so much in like this number of years from this number of years. But I feel like everybody is changing all of the time. That's just like how we are as humans. It's how we're wired as humans. And when you get married young, but even when you get married in general, you're always growing up together. There's gonna be always some element of like you are changing over time, and you've committed to love your spouse through that process of change. And so I think this whole idea of staying curious is all about being a student of your spouse, always recognizing that there's more that you can learn over time. You're being a student right now. There's always more that you can learn about your spouse. You can always be surprised by them. You can always ask a new question that you haven't asked before, or take up a new hobby together so you have something new to talk about, or even learn about their hobbies and take the opportunity to chat about those things with them too. He's looking at me because I don't play Warzone with him.
Or any of my hobbies. You did let me talk to you about watches for like an hour the other day.
That was great. I loved
nice.
that conversation. It was really good.
Mm-hmm.
But this idea of like my husband growing up over time and changing, it doesn't scare me. I'm not nervous about who the person is going to be 5 years from now or 10 years from now, because I also know in my heart that Jared is committed to his relationship with God. And so if he's committed to that, then I know that the version of him 5-10 years from now is going to be better than the one that is today, Lord willing. But that's kind of the commitment that we just have with each other. And so I think a really big thing with this is even just like removing some of the distractions from your relationship that are easy to get in the way, like technology and phones. It's so much easier to sit beside each other and just scroll than like ask questions of like, how was your day? Like, what are you feeling right now? What are you thinking right now? And really just staying curious about your spouse and the person that God has created them to be, but also who he's like helping them become over time too. So stay curious.
We have like the same ones. You just have like catchier titles for yours.
What's your next one?
Mine is like you have to keep trying.
Yeah.
Like you have to keep trying in your marriage. It is, but it's like along the same lines of I don't know, I think people will just quit on putting effort into the relationship once they lock in with marriage. They're so invested in the dating season where it's like I'll do anything, I'll do whatever, I'll be whatever, I'm willing to learn, I'm willing to grow, I'm willing to change. And they lock into marriage, and like 6 months into that or a year into that, they're just like, this is how I am, and like you can't go anywhere now. You got to keep trying. Like you can't just say, oh, it's just the way that I am. You have to put effort into that. Like for you and me, you need like verbal affirmation, right? Like words are a big thing to you, and I am partially like that, but I'm more like
physical touch.
I'm a lot of things. I'm a lot of things, but not that one so much. And that one is so, like, for you, you're like, oh, I need you to, like, say nice things about me. And I'm like, I've been saying so many nice things about you. But it's just, like, it's not me trying. It's just, like, what comes out. Like, I'm generally, like, nice to people. I try to be. And for you, it's like, oh, yeah, you look nice today. And I'll be like, I'll just say it when I mean it. And then that's, like, few and far between in your mind. You need it more than that. And so for me, I'm just like, well, I say it, and it's your problem. Like, I do tell you look nice, and you need to get over it, whatever. Like, that's me not trying. But me trying is like, okay, I feel like I say it a lot. I feel like I've been trying. You obviously need it more than that. So, like, I'm going to, like, do whatever it takes to say it more so that
to the point where he like put a reminder in his phone to do it. Like, get practical.
Still said that wasn't enough. I was like, I put the reminder in, and that was just like, but I just started like swiping the reminder because I was like, oh yeah, I do it. But now it's like we had a good conversation where you were like, I feel like we were just missing each other in the busyness of life. And so now I'm like, okay, cool. Every time I think it, I need to make sure that I say it, because I'm like, what do you need? And then I'm going to continue to try to meet those needs to the best of my ability. And again, like, you can't meet all of your partner's needs. That's why you have a relationship with God where you're working on those things and you're finding your own peace in your relationship with God, not in somebody else, because you're never going to get that. But what I can do, I should be doing, and I should be trying. And I think a lot of the struggle is when guys just tap out and then they're like, I'm doing my best. And it's like, no, you're not. If you're doing your best, if you're really doing your best, like, this wouldn't be a problem. What's that quote with Dwight when he's like, did you try your hardest? I tried my pretty hardest. Yeah. I think that's what it was. And it's like, no, did you try your hardest?
Yeah.
Like, did you do your, like, actually your best to meet that need? Or did you just kind of tap out because it was hard, you know?
Yeah.
And this is I'm kind of rambling, I know, but this is like that idea in, and I always heard it and I thought it was stupid when I was like, you still need to pursue your wife and chase her, and I'm like,
Right.
okay, like, yeah, yes and no, but then as I'm married, I'm like, yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense, because I did do all that stuff when we were dating, tried to like write you notes and all of these things to like win your affection, and then I got confident in your affection because I'm like, cool, I've won it, but it's like, now what, you quit? Like, your
Right,
affection is always needing to be won, and I sound exactly like the freaking like people that I got annoyed by before, but it is true.
Your spouse is always worthy of your affection. That never actually goes away. Is that the second or the third?
That was the second, but we had the same freaking thing at the end.
All right, I have 2 more. How many do you have left?
I know, I really only had 2, but I'm gonna do a third one.
Okay, I'm sure something will come up. Okay, so this next one that I have, I don't think that you'll have. Not to say that you haven't learned it,
Okay.
but this one.
And let me tell you, you don't know anything
He
about
knows
this
nothing
one.
about this one.
And it has to do with words.
It's gonna
And
sound.
it's about saying nice things to each other, and you have no idea, idiot.
Don't say that. No, it's gonna sound worse now that I say it.
Oh, say
but
it.
The
You're gonna
third,
teach yourself up for that one.
this next one that I have is to commit to prayer.
Oh, okay.
So I say this from my context because this is a really big one that I learned in the first year of marriage.
You are good at this.
Someone gifted me this book that was called The Power of a Praying Wife. And basically it's like a roadmap that helps you learn how to effectively pray for your husband and highlight all these different areas that you may not actually think to pray for. So things like his mental health, like his ability to even like manage anger was one of the ones that was in there. Like his work-life balance, his like relationship with finances, his purity, all of these different things. And so it laid all of those out, and I was able to really like intentionally pray over those in our first year of marriage. But it's just a habit that I've kept up since then. But it is such an important thing that we can do as like a spouse of someone else, to actually like come before God in prayer for that person and just like believing for more for them, or for healing, or just continued growth in different areas, or whatever that looks like. It really is something that I think that especially today couples are not recognizing, like how much opportunity there is in that like tool in their tool belt of marriage essentially. Right. And so there's often times where I talk to people and they'll say things like, oh, I wish my husband like was more of like a spiritual leader in our home, or I wish that this or this. And 2 things with that. I think that one of the first things that you notice the more that you pray for your husband is you start to recognize like the plank in your own eye, as it talks about in Matthew 7, where you just become aware of the fact that like,
Did you write
okay.
Matthew 7 down?
No, I remember that one.
Oh, that's good.
Thank you.
Good word.
Or there's like this tendency that you start to recognize, like, I don't actually do that in the marriage either. And so God starts to reveal things to you in that process of praying for your spouse. But then the other thing is, in that process of praying for your spouse, God can do so much more on your husband's behalf than any of your nagging or persistent complaining or any of these things can actually do. And so I would just say, like, bring those things to God and actually see how he's able to work in your husband's life over time, but also in your own life. There's a really good book about this, and it's called, I think, Praying Circles Around Your Marriage, or Praying Circles Around Your Spouse, or something like that. It's by Mark Batterson, but it's really good. It basically just talks about how prayer should be one of those things that's just so core and like that we always come back to in marriage. So yeah, that would be my next one.
That's good. The third thing would be like always do the hard thing. Like don't forego doing the hard thing in order to just do what feels good or is easier. So I think a lot of that time it's like apologizing. So it's really hard to apologize, but oftentimes people just won't. They'll find a way to make it the other person's fault. They'll find a way to shirk their own ownership. And maybe they'll even recognize like, oh, I messed up in this, but they won't verbalize that.
Right.
Because that's hard to verbalize and hard to apologize. It's hard to like let your pride go, and it's hard to like let your frustration with the other person go to apologize.
Or people will feel something and they will actually never say anything about it because it's easier to hold on.
Yeah, this is what works really well with us. Like you are faster always to apologize than I am and take responsibility.
But I'm much slower.
But you are
to
way
voice
slower
when
to
I'm
voice
upset.
Things that you're frustrated about.
Yeah.
And that's where like my personality is good, because I cannot engage in a relationship that is not real. I can't even go through like making dinner without saying something. Right. But I think that like like doing the hard thing and bringing up the hard topics. And again, that's skipped in these dating phases, and then people get married and then those hard things never go away, but they just never dealt with them, and they get harder and harder to deal with over time. Pastor Brandon says this thing all the time, and I love it. It's like pay a little now or pay a lot later. You either deal with the hard things up front, or they grow and they grow and they grow, and then you're paying a ton later. You gotta listen to the people around you. You gotta keep doing the hard thing to change. And often the hardest thing is like being humble and inviting people into the conversation, or like admitting that you're not all the things that you need to be, or admitting that there's something wrong.
The last one that I have to share is to operate as a team. So one of the things that we talked about a lot when we were dating even is this concept of us being better together than we are apart. And I think like when you bring a team together and like think of marriage as a team, that's the whole purpose of why we even have teams at businesses. It's because all of those people, when they're brought together, can actually do more than they can when they're apart. And so then when I think of like how businesses operate, it's like, we know that teams have meetings, like they align with each other. They all get back into the same room and they talk about how things are going, where they're going as a team. Why wouldn't we do the same thing with our marriages? And so Jared and I have tried to be intentional. We haven't always been perfect in it, but some of the things that we'll always do is like after a year, we'll take inventory of how things went that year, talk a little bit more about what we want that next year to look like. And before we got into the pandemic, we were also doing these quarterly getaways that were also really great for us to go and to do that same thing every quarter of just talking about where things were at, where we wanted them to go, and just align together again. Like, how's our finances?
Oh,
like, like, do you have anything that's gone unsaid? Or like, what are you dreaming about right now? Or,
that was hard. That was good.
It was really hard.
Was really good.
There were some stuff in there that, and it would come out in those conversations that we were having. But it is really good to make sure that you are at certain points of your relationship taking inventory and realigning, because you really are a team. And at the end of the day, your team and your marriage will be better if you guys are on the same page. So make sure that you are taking time to realign with each other in that way. Do that. Should we do a juicy one?
You gotta say juicy when you're talking about sex. It's gross.
It's not like so over the line juicy.
It's gonna get graphic.
We're not laying it all out on the table. But I would say for people that are like, especially in the early years of their marriage, that are maybe struggling like with their sex life, is that there's always opportunity for your sex life to get better with time. I think like that's another thing that, especially for people that like know that we like didn't actually have sex before we got married, they're like, well, what's that phrase where they're like, well, how do you know like if the thing is, if you don't test it or whatever?
Like, how do I know if it's gonna be good until we do it beforehand? That's the same argument with living together. It's the same argument with having sex, all that stuff.
Yeah. But I think like that whole thing comes back down to like, if you are approaching marriage and like your sex life with this unselfish approach, there's always potential for it to get better. Because if I approach it from the perspective of like, what can I do to make this better for Jared? And Jared's approaching it with the perspective of like, what can I do to make this better for Beth? Like over time, it's going to get better. That's just how it's gonna go.
And that's like, that's a concept that overarches the whole thing. It's not just about like physically, what can I do to get better, or like to make this better for physically, because again, like guys have a different approach to sex than women do. And like for you it's more emotional, it's more about a connection. For me, that's part of it, but it's like 10%.
With some love and affection.
Yeah, and by that you literally just like clean the kitchen and stuff. The most I've gotten is after like cleaning the house. And it's like, oh, okay, cool. If you're really feeling it, just like do the laundry. But I think that is like, that's more of what we're talking about, because I remember hearing these things of like, oh yeah, make it better for her, make it better, and I was just like Googling like how to like do this, how to do that, and it's like, okay, that's part of it, right? Like it's holistic, and that's why like if you want to have a better sex life, go do all the other things in this video first, right? Because it's like, it's not about just doing like having sex a lot, because people will be like, oh, make sure you're having sex a lot. Well, if it sucks for one of those people or both, like don't do it a lot. Figure it out first and then start doing it a lot. But that's more of the thing, is like it's more holistic. Sex is way more holistic than just like a feeling that you can give and receive like with your partner. It's way more dynamic than that. And you can get better at it over time. Like if you guys are really struggling with it right now, that's fine. Like we were really nervous going into marriage because we were just like,
we were luckily like blessed in that department like early on. Like I remember even on our honeymoon, we were like, okay, this is pretty good. But looking at that like compared to what we are able to do now, which just sounds house. Like, we're not like
Totally
flying off the
different.
ceiling.
yeah. We can do it upside down. We can do it like big place, big position. It's crazy. We didn't know anything back then. Let me tell you. Nowadays,
Hit us up.
hit us up for what? Don't hit us up.
Alright, we're gonna wrap it up here. I hope that this was helpful for you guys, and some of the conversation that we've had here was helpful or enlightening to you, whatever stage of your relationship you guys are at. I also just want to say that if there's anyone that's watching this and is maybe engaged right now or dating and thinking about marriage, or you're even married and you're like, I'm in the thick of this right now and it's not going well, I don't know what to do in this area, I'm actually going to drop my email in the description box of this video, so you can send an email. I mean, again, we are not experts on marriage, but if there's any way that we can help or even just pray for you and you don't want to comment publicly what your name is below, then definitely take the opportunity to do that, because we would love to be praying for you guys and coming alongside you in this. But otherwise, again, share this video with someone that you think it could be helpful to. Make sure that you like it before you go, and subscribe to this channel for more content like this. We would love to get to know you guys and have you along for the journey. So we love you guys, and we will see you next week. Feels like I've been it.
Feels like I've been it. I've been it.
It feels like I've been a minute.
Holy frick!
That's how you say that.
Been a minute. It's like I've been a minute. It's been a minute.
I believe even are like still married right now, being 20 years old and in our early 20s. I don't like that at all.
Yeah, what are you saying? And it's only God that's kept us together in the last 2 years. You can figure it out for 2 years.